My name is Dave Dixon. I'm the co-chair of the Canadian Municipal Network and Crime Prevention's Board of Directors. On behalf of the Canadian Municipal Network and Crime Prevention, I'd really like to welcome you to their webinar on the role of new media in crime prevention and community safety. This event is part of the network's Future of Safe Communities speaker series. Before we start, I'd like to just take a moment and start us off in a good way by a land acknowledgement. I'm joining you today from the city of Williams Lake in British Columbia, which lies within the Secwepemc territory, traditional territory, and neighbors both the Exalt and the Hatsuil First Nations. Also, the city of Williams Lake is home to many Chilcotin and Dene peoples. I would like to encourage everyone now to just take a moment and put in the chat box the traditional territory from which they are joining, so we can recognize Indigenous lands from coast to coast. I acknowledge the land as a small act of reconciliation to honor the land and the Indigenous heritage and history. I also want to reiterate that when we talk about community safety and other related topics, as we will be discussing today, it is crucial to recognize that a number of these issues disproportionately impact our Indigenous communities in this country. And a lot of these challenges can be explained in part by the intergenerational trauma and negative life experiences that the legacy left by residential schools and colonization. When we conclude to consider the systemic barriers and inequities, when conducting work, reiterated to community safety and well-being in community safety. Before we start with the presentation, I'd like to give some background information on the network for those of you who may not be familiar with this organization. The Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention is a membership-based nonprofit organization that serves as a community of practice focused on supporting communities to prevent crime, increase community safety, and reduce violence. To achieve this, the network promotes a community-led multi-sector approach that includes a full range of preventative measures in key sectors such as education, health and social services, child welfare, housing, and indigenous organizations to name a few. Sorry, folks. Of importance is the fact that prevention and community safety are not imagined as a police issue only, but as a collective responsibility, including multi-sectoral partners. Having seen a steady increase in membership, the network now represents over 100 rural and urban communities, over 50% of the Canadian population. Our smallest member community has a population of about 800 folks, while our largest is the city of Toronto with over 6 million people. Next slide. The core of our work about facilitating opportunities for cities and communities across Canada to share their practices. We also provide training in crime prevention and community safety, including a specific training on crime prevention in a rural context. We regularly provide webinars of topics of interest, such as the event today. We also publish documents to summarize and mobilize knowledge, evidence, and research related to community safety. Sometimes we work closely with communities on a project basis to help them develop their community safety and well-being plans. And that's classic what happened in Williams Lake when we built our well-being and community safety strategic plan. The network members Audrey and Felix and Jan attended here, and through their great leadership and advice helped us develop our plan. So if you wish to join our network and become a member of the network, you'll see the joining email address on the screen, and we welcome you with open arms to join us. So on that note, I'll hand it over to Audrey to introduce the topic of today's webinar. Thanks, folks, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you for opening up on a good note today. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this event on the role of new media in crime prevention and community safety. My name is Audrey Monette. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Projects and Research for the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention. I'm very pleased to be joined today by my colleagues Mihnea and Fetila, who works closely with us at CMNCP and also led the development of our topic summary on new media and community safety, which we will be discussing a little later, as well as Hilary de Menna, who is the coordinator of the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centres Draw the Line campaign. And together we will talk about new media, some of the opportunities that they present, generally speaking, but also with regards to violence prevention and community safety more specifically. And then we'll discuss some key elements for, how to build a successful campaign, some examples of social media or new media campaigns, and then some practice implications as well. A couple of logistical items before we dive into this session today. At the bottom of your screen, or the top or bottom of your screen, you should have a menu bar in which there is a Q&A option. Throughout the presentations today, feel free to go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A box. We'll be monitoring those throughout, and then at the end of the presentations, we will go through and have some conversation and answer those some of those questions. I do also want to mention that the presentations are being recorded and will be made available through our YouTube channel as well, if you did want to share that. So before we start talking about the presentation today, I do want to acknowledge that when we discuss new media or social media and community safety, it's a topic that's quite broad and also very complex. We know that new media can take different forms, but also have a number of various impacts. So for instance, we've been having growing conversations with communities around some concerns related to online harm, for example, some safety risks in the online world, particularly for children, and just some of the other kind of general potential dangers related to new media, social media, and the online world. And we've been hearing things like online radicalization or extremism, cyberbullying, fraud, identity theft, and just the overall impacts of social media on mental health. We are increasingly looking into those topics in the broader conversation around community safety and well-being. And we do believe that that warrants kind of its own conversation. So we will be looking into that. Today, however, I just wanted to kind of clarify the specific topic of the webinar, which is to focus on more of the opportunities that new media and social media present, whether that be for social change, education and awareness, and just the growing role that they can play in increasing safety and the contributions to violence prevention efforts. So first things first, what do we mean when we talk about new media? So obviously we know that traditional media campaigns, typically they deliver information to large groups or large populations, and that can, take various forms, including TV commercials, newspaper, radio advertisements. And typically these traditional measures don't allow viewers to provide direct feedback or immediate responses. So there's not that ongoing communication loop. On the other hand, new media, they really allow campaign coordinators to actively engage with their audience. So when we talk about new media, it typically refers to social media, which most of you will be quite familiar with. So platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and so on and so forth. And so what really kind of defines new media is that they facilitate engagement. So, content creators have a lot of interactive features that they can use. It allows people to do, an instant feedback loop, whether that be through likes or comments or sharing the content. And when we combine these new platforms with, more and more people having smartphone technology, the increase of access to free public Wi-Fi in a number of spaces, and then just a growing number of tools, new media has really led to an increase in the types of content that people can access, but also just the number of people that are accessing it more broadly, because it's becoming easier and easier. So generally speaking, the literature documents several opportunities created by new media. And the first one that often comes up is that it's often described as a way to enact social change. So, we read things like social media allows people to speak freely, to call for action, to raise awareness as well. But it also allows people to support causes, whether that be through fundraising, hosting events, sharing information. And so ultimately, new media is really a way to build virtual bridges, which makes it easier for social movements to gain more and more momentum. It also allows to communicate more messages to more people in a way that's very rapid, and people can kind of interact and respond to that in real time. And we've heard a lot of organizations say that through these forms of new media, collaboration becomes more engaging and accessible among the larger communities, groups, and ultimately these larger social change movements. We know that in a lot of cases, new media is a little bit less filtered, so that gives more power to call out injustices or inaccuracies. And a perfect example of that is the hashtag. One example that comes to mind is the hashtag Why I Stayed, which was kind of a groundbreaking movement in communicating the complexities of domestic violence. And it really helped to raise awareness and educate people in order to dispel some of the stereotypes or false perceptions around survivors of domestic violence. And that brings me to talk about the role of new media a little bit more specifically with regards to violence prevention and community safety. So again, when going through some of the literature, I found a number of articles describing the impacts of new media. And I quickly realized that in a lot of cases, they can actually help address some of the risk factors or challenges related to crime and safety in communities. So for example, we know that the lack of strong social networks, a weak sense of belonging, or a lack of general connectedness to community can actually increase crime or have negative impacts on people's perceptions of safety and well-being. Well, different forms of new media, such as social media, have been shown to actually strengthen community building and community development. They're becoming a catalyst for neighborhood cooperation and social action, and inspiring more people to just be involved in community life more generally. And again, an example of this is a national organization based in the UK. They started hearing a lot of people saying that they were concerned about litter and just a general lack of cleanliness in their community, which is actually something that we hear quite often when working with communities here in Canada as well. So this organization in the UK, they launched a social media campaign that was called Keep Britain Tidy. And through their social media platforms, they encouraged people to organize local litter pickups, and people would get together and take photos and post it on social media with the hashtag. And then really quickly, first of all, it built community. People met their neighbors, they got together, they chatted, but then also they picked up litter. And so it actually addressed the issue that was being brought up with regards to the lack of cleanliness. So again, that contributed to community safety more broadly, and is a good example of how social media can play a role in that. Another risk factor for violence, and particularly sexual or gender-based violence, is general social norms that foster violence, stigma, lack of accountability, and so on and so forth. And again, we've heard that social media can serve as a way to kind of change those norms about sexual assault or sexual violence by disseminating ideas and knowledge to a larger population, allowing the voices of survivors to be heard and getting stories out there as well. But also it allows perpetrators to kind of hear those voices and just have access to that general kind of information and education as well. And then the last, another challenge that we hear about quite often with regards to crime prevention or community safety is the lack of knowledge about preventative approaches and protective factors, for instance. And so we've seen a lot of organizations, whether that be police or even neighborhood watch groups have used this, municipal governments as well, that will use social media to post different tips and tricks or suggestions related to crime prevention. So, you could think of social media blasts that exist to remind people to lock their car doors. In rural areas, we've seen campaigns that provide some education for farmers on how to identify their equipment to reduce the risk of theft. And sometimes people just don't know that information, and through social media, there's, again, a greater reach. And then there's also some online supports and prevention approaches that have been developed. I would say particularly during COVID, when we moved a lot of our, interventions to the virtual world. And I'm sure some of you will have heard of that hand symbol that was circulating with regards to kind of identifying if someone was experiencing domestic violence, and they could use that signal on a virtual platform to ask for help. It's certainly not a perfect approach, but it just goes to show how those movements can gain momentum and educate more people. So there you go. That's kind of an example, or a couple of examples of ways to use social media in crime prevention or community safety efforts. And of course, there's likely many other ways that they can be used, but I thought I'd share a couple of key items that were highlighted in the literature with regards to the role that new media can play. And on that note, I will hand it over to Mihnea.
Thank you, Audrey. So as Audrey suggested, new media has a virtually limitless reach. And this means that conversations about violence now have the potential to increase public understanding on a new scale. So naturally, we decided to conduct some research on new media, the opportunities they create for social change, and how that can be beneficial to crime prevention and community safety efforts. So we reviewed literature related to key elements for successful social media campaigns that have positive impact. And all of this information was compiled into a topic summary developed by the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention, and one which we are excited to officially launch today. And the link to access that document will be posted in the chat. So now we'll spend a bit of time sharing the key findings from the topic summary.
So I do want to make sure I share my screen with the sound so that I can actually provide a couple of examples of different social media campaigns and how they have been, or social media platforms, I should say, and how they've been used by different communities in the context of community safety and crime prevention. So before diving into the findings from the topic summary, we thought it might be helpful to provide a bit of an overview of the different platforms, some of which tend to be used a bit more widely, and to provide some examples of how they have been used in different communities in this context of crime prevention and community safety. The first one is YouTube, which is a free video sharing website, essentially, that I think they describe it as allowing everyday people to create and upload their own videos and content and share that with others. And I think one of the reasons why YouTube is so incredibly popular is just because there are videos on every single topic. So, you can find cooking videos to family videos to, different organizational promotional videos from actual, organizations or businesses that are using it in that professional manner. So here's an example of a video published by the City of Regina on YouTube when they were working on the development of a community safety and well-being plan. And it's a video of their mayor that kind of introduces the project and encourages folks to participate in the survey that was being administered as part of the planning process. And after the video actually launched, we saw a large influx of respondents take the survey. So again, that shows how this YouTube video actually communicated the project and encouraged folks to take part in it. So I will show you the video. Hillary or Felix, do you want to do a thumbs up if you can hear it, just to make sure?
This past year has reminded us all about the value of our health and safety, but also about having a community of people around us to support and work together in times of need. I want to tell you about an important project the city is working on, and I'm asking you to participate in. Over the next few months, we are partnering with the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention to develop a community safety and well-being plan for Regina. Communities across Canada are increasing their focus on community safety and well-being by recognizing that community safety cannot rest solely on the shoulders of the police. Instead, we recognize that community safety and well-being is a responsibility we all share, and it requires an integrated approach through social development, prevention, and risk intervention. There is an opportunity to look closely at our community and understand how the needs of all residents are being met and where we need to focus attention to address the gaps. We want to learn how you and your neighbors feel about community safety and well-being in Regina. We want to get a better understanding of the places you feel safe, what issues present barriers for people in our city, and what we can do to build on our community strengths and remove barriers to help everyone experience a positive quality of life. And we want to develop strategies to reduce and prevent crime. This is about identifying actions that the city can take so that Regina is better for everyone. You can help by participating. Starting today, we are launching a community safety and well-being survey on Be Heard Regina. You'll find it to be more in-depth than many surveys, but the information being collected is so important to developing a comprehensive plan. The development of the plan will also focus on consultations with diverse demographics in Regina, and there will be other opportunities to engage and provide feedback on Be Heard Regina. You can sign up to stay informed. Visit regina.ca/wellbeing to learn more. Regina, every time there's a call for volunteers or for help in our city, it's in our city's DNA to answer. This is one of those calls. Thank you so much in advance for your time, your thoughts, and for your participation.
So there you go. That's one example of a community that used YouTube, and you see there's a very clear message, a call to action, speaking directly to the public. And so that led, as I said, to some really positive responses and people watching the video and sharing it on their social media and encouraging their networks to take part in the survey. The next platform we'll talk about briefly is Facebook, which is a social networking site that allows to share and connect with mostly family and friends, but it can also be shared publicly as well. I think Facebook is probably the largest social network, and it allows users to share a bunch of different types of content, whether that be photos, videos, news articles, and so on and so forth. There are also some specific groups that can be created on Facebook. So we've seen this in community where people from specific neighborhoods will come together and create a group where they can kind of exchange on what's happening in the community. So again, that can be interesting for the purpose of community safety. And here on the slide, you see an example of Crime Prevention Ottawa's Facebook page. And you see an example, this is an old post, but it was a post that highlighted someone that had been nominated for the Crime Prevention Prize. So again, people can, like, comment, or share. They can know about, some of the local leaders in crime prevention. And again, just raise awareness and education about some of the work that they're doing, but also the topic of crime prevention more broadly. And then the next platform here is Instagram, which basically, instead of words, is built mostly around sharing images or videos. And when someone shares a video or a photo to Instagram, it becomes available on their profile, and then other users who follow that profile can see the posts in their feed. And again, they have the option to like, comment, share, and really interact with that content. And the example I have on the slide here is the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council's Instagram profile. So you see they have, a short bio that gives an idea of the work that they do. And then if you click on the image, you can have access to a short description. And through this, the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council can, again, connect with community, inform the public of different initiatives or events, but they also share some educational content. So you see they have some information on truth and reconciliation, for example, and those sorts of educational pieces. So Mihnea is going to talk about the two last platforms that we'll be presenting today.
The first of the last two is Twitter, and Twitter is really interesting. So on Twitter, users are able to post and interact with messages known as tweets. And the key characteristic of these tweets is that they're restricted to 280 characters. So of course, this has its pros and cons. On the one hand, it's an effective way of quickly communicating with countless users who are likely scrolling through thousands of tweets a day. And on the other hand, a lot can get lost in that limited space. So consequently, tweeting about vital issues requires a bit of care, especially considering the fact that Twitter is known as a more political platform. A good and relatively recent example of Twitter's political function was Donald Trump's campaign. So here we can think about how Donald Trump used the platform to not only to rally his support, but also in many cases spread misinformation. So on the screen here, you see an example of CMNCP's Twitter profile. On the left-hand side, there's a menu through which users can explore different topics, including what many Twitter users are looking at right now, or in other words, what's trending. You can also send messages to people and see your notifications when people interact with your content. Twitter is another platform that is widely used by people of all demographics. And on CMNCP's page here, you can see the latest tweet in which we shared our guide to bystander intervention. We provide a short description within the character limit and share a link to access the tool. Then if people want to share this with their networks, they can retweet and it will appear on their page as well. Now let's talk about the newest social media platform that is most popular among people aged 16 to 24, TikTok. So TikTok is a short form video sharing platform that allows users to create and share 15-second videos on any topic, and then they can add music, audio, text, special effects, and so on to sort of enhance their creation. The videos can be merged together to make up to 60-second clips. While lip syncs and dancing are the most popular videos on the app, there are subcategories of TikTok that are gaining a lot of attention, including videos that are more educational or based on social issues. So we have an example here of a 15-second TikTok from a very popular Inuk TikToker sharing information about food costs in indigenous communities. The TikTok is educational, includes some simple calls to action, and a link to a website that raises awareness about the issue. It's a perfect example of how effective a short video like this can be when we're trying to raise awareness and encourage people to take action. So in other words, it encourages behavioral change. So as I mentioned, social media platforms have the capacity to encourage behavioral change, and they can do so there's two different approaches. The first is a direct approach that seeks to influence individual decision-making by reducing obstacles, helping people recognize unhealthy norms, and tying positive emotions to pro-social change. So for example, anti-violence campaigns might communicate the cost of violence and then provide a support number, or associate peaceful conflict resolution with positive self-regard. And then there's indirect approaches. And indirect approaches involve repeatedly exposing viewers to information that sparks discussion about a particular issue. So individuals who have directly engaged with the campaign might then indirectly influence those who have not seen it by discussing the issue with them, encouraging the adoption of new norms, and then gaining their support. Media campaigns may also inspire policy change by stimulating widespread discussions that demand political attention and legal response.
All right, and so to wrap up our presentation, we thought we would present a couple of the key elements that come up in terms of, what's required for a campaign to be successful. And one of the key things to consider when developing a campaign on social media or through new media is the audience, of course. So a campaign that doesn't have a target audience often doesn't influence behavior as much because community members just don't feel that the message applies to them as much. So campaigns that do focus on smaller populations or specific actions do tend to see more success in that way. And on the screen here, you see an example of a poster from the 2010 Don't Be That Guy poster campaign, which was launched by Sexual Assault Voices for Edmonton. And their famous slogan, some of you have probably heard of the Don't Be That Guy campaign. So it's really the hallmark of the campaign, but it actively identifies, who their specific audience is, which is men. And so you can see an example of one of the posters here and the slogan here at the bottom. And this was widely shared on social media. It was also available in print form, and it's just a great example of how to target an audience very specifically. Another item that we wanted to bring up is considering the risks. So obviously, community safety campaigns are, well intended, but they can sometimes they have the risk to reinforce misconceptions about violence, victimization, offending, and so on and so forth. And so an example of that would be a campaign that's aimed at reducing victimization, but that would accidentally cause victim blaming or further stigmatize certain groups of individuals, for example. And so because of that, we do recommend that people who are coordinating campaigns or developing them consider the different potential impacts and the ways that the message could be interpreted. So that could include, having a strong background on the topic or reaching out to people that do have strong backgrounds on that specific topic for that campaign, but also, trying to get feedback before it launches. So having some different consultations to ensure that the themes and the messages, including in the campaign, really acknowledge the needs and the perspectives of those that are targeted by that campaign. So for example, a couple years ago, right before COVID, CMNCP, we were working closely with the federal government on the development of a social media campaign that focused on the prevention of youth victimization. And a key step in that process was to conduct a bunch of different consultation processes. Some were in person, some were virtual, and we really brought in a bunch of different youth from different backgrounds and who had different lived experiences. And we said, here's what we're trying to achieve. What kind of messages would you like to see included in that campaign? How do you interpret this? Do you have any suggestions? And then we compiled all of that, created the messages, and then of course went back to kind of validate what we came up with. So really making sure that the risks are avoided through those kind of consultations. Another piece is tailoring the messages. So, we know that campaign messages need to be tailored to the chosen audience, but also be relevant in the current, social, political climate, as well as delivered quickly. And so we've seen that visual formats, so short videos or photos, can be a really effective option for that. And as I said, it's also important to consider the way that they will be interpreted. So again, a social campaign that's against public transit, for example, or theft in public transit, should avoid, blaming the passengers for leaving their wallet behind. But maybe it's better to ask people that use public transit to remain attentive and alert a fellow commuter if they forgot a belonging or something like that. So again, it's really the way that the message is spun can resonate with people differently. And campaigns, if possible, could also feature a specific call to action. So you saw that in the example of the mayor of Regina that had a specific call to action of filling out the survey. The TikTok that we just showed with regards to the cost of food in Indigenous communities. At the end, she said, what can you do to help? There was a website there, some donation links. And that again just creates an increase in people engaging with it and the momentum just being really positive. And so the example that we included on the slide here is the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen on social media a couple of years ago. And really the challenge was to dare participants to post these fundraising videos in which they literally dumped a bucket of iced water over their heads and then nominated a couple of friends or family to do the same. So there'd be short videos, they're easy to share, you tag people. So again, it creates that momentum. And that just goes to show that campaigns that focus on creating shareable and dynamic content does increase the reach of that campaign.
So the next, I guess, trait that you want for your campaign is kind of a freebie. It's be engaging. So campaigns should use platforms and features that are familiar to their audience. So for instance, if you're primarily trying to reach youth, you might want to consider TikTok. If you're attempting to reach an older audience, then Facebook might be the way to go. Another way to elicit engagement is to identify and capitalize on trend jacking opportunities. So trendjacking makes use of recognized dates, events, or other initiatives to propel a campaign. So for example, a group looking to raise awareness about mental health could synchronize their campaign with larger efforts such as Bell Let's Talk initiative. So a good example of trendjacking is the City of Surrey's Block 'em, Don't Share 'em campaign, which encourages youth to protect themselves and others by deleting intimate images and never sharing them. So following 2 news releases highlighting a rise in youth extortion cases, the City of Surrey's Community Safety Division launched a campaign in collaboration with the RCMP. In order to better promote their initiative, the campaign managers coordinated the launch with Canada's Pink Shirt Day, which is a nationally recognized event dedicated to cyberbullying awareness that's highlighted by wardrobe changes and social media buzz. Credibility. So obviously you want your campaign to be credible. And naturally this starts with the campaign spokesperson. In the context of community safety, it's important that a community safety campaign's public figures be widely accepted as people who are able to share important and perhaps difficult information and encourage social change. So let's take the Government of Canada's Workplace Harassment and Violence Prevention Awareness Campaign as an example. To increase the credibility of its campaign, the Canadian government clearly sources itself and lists its website and information hotline. On the other hand, it's unlikely that, for example, a young male audience would accept Mike Tyson's condemnation of violence, given his career as a professional boxer. And this is regardless of whether he endorses a peaceful lifestyle now or how influential a figure he might be.
Another element that stood out as well was the importance of the visuals, so standing out visually. So, you know, initiatives that have a logo that's nice and that communicates the message in a way that's really catchy and obvious do tend to have, you know, success. And a great example of that is the World Health Organization's global campaign for violence prevention. So you see their logo or their key visual here, which is a really great way to depict a literal stop to violence. So you have the hand with the punch. It's eye-catching. You see the photo and you get a sense right away of what it's about. So it's very intuitive. And so again, just a simple and effective way to communicate that message. Another item is, so we listed it as be sensitive. And what we mean by this is that, you know, campaigns should be an effort towards social change that aims to educate and tell a story or communicate a message in a way that shouldn't be threatening or insensitive. So again, if we go back to the example of a campaign that tries to reduce theft in public transit, well, the threatening option would be something like, you know, we will get you or we will find you. And we've seen these kind of things in the past, and people tend to not associate or resonate as much with a message that's more threatening. And so an alternative to that could be to, you know, relay some potential consequences and then ask something like, is it worth it? So it's the same message, but at the end of the day, people will just kind of interpret it in a way that tends to be more positive, and it's just received in a way that's again more positive. And then obviously campaigns should avoid including content that could upset the audience, whether that be graphic images or, you know, something that's just very insensitive and that could draw people away from wanting to engage with the content in the first place. And a fun example that we found is the Alzheimer's Association in the US. And they created this campaign when there was a strong political divide between Republicans and Democrats. And so they used kind of that red and blue, the colors on their logo, and they have a unifying message. So we don't see it here, but it says something that both sides can agree on, ending Alzheimer's. So it's that unifying message, and, you know, making sure that they're communicating it to everyone. It's cheerful, it's not insensitive. And again, people tend to respond well to these kinds of messages. Another item is the duration. So again, when we were going through and having a look at some campaigns that have been successful, we saw that campaigns should be long enough that they're able to convey the message and that enough people actually have time to interact with it, but also be short enough to avoid losing their meaning, right? Because you don't want it to just get lost and people just not even reacting to it or not engaging with it. So campaigns that are coordinated in short bursts do tend to be quite effective. And as Mihnea was saying, especially when they're synchronized with another specific event, so that trend jacking idea. And an example of that would be, so the Bullying Awareness Week, which is, quite popular among schools across North America. So it's a 1-week campaign. So it allows that it's short enough so that people focus on it and discuss it, but it comes back every year. So, it's recognizable, people know it's coming, they prepare their messaging and their events in order to have them go out on that week. So that's quite effective as well. And Mihnea will talk about the last piece, which is the integration.
So lastly, social media campaigns should be integrated across platforms. And this is not only because engaging on different platforms will likely broaden your audience, but different platforms offer different ways to engage with that audience. So for example, Instagram's visual content might generate more engagement than non-visual posts on other platforms. On the other hand, Twitter may be a better platform for answering questions and addressing concerns. So therefore, it's ideal if online initiatives are diversified across a variety of platforms to increase the potential pool of consumers and the methods of interacting with them.
All right, and so that is what wraps up our piece around some of the key things that we highlighted in that topic summary. I will post that in the chat in just a moment here in case any of you want to go in and have a look at it in a little bit more detail, but they're just some things to keep in mind when developing a campaign and how these social media or new media platforms can actually play a role and support crime prevention and community safety efforts in communities and organizations. But in addition to some of those pieces that are very, high level, we also wanted to make sure that we shared some of the practice implications of developing campaigns and using these different forms of new media. And so I'm very pleased to introduce you to Hilary de Menna, who is as I said earlier, the coordinator for the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centers Draw the Line campaign. She also supports the organization with their overall social media presence, so has lots of experience with developing different posts and content with regards to violence prevention and awareness. And so Hilary is going to talk a little bit about some of the realities of developing and running social media campaigns in an organization like that. So some of the challenge, some of the successes, and some of the learnings along the way. And you'll get to hear more about the Draw the Line campaign at the same time. So Hilary, over to you.
Hello, thank you. I'm just going to get my share screen up. Dun, dun, dun. All right, perfect. Almost all set up. Excellent. And I'll just address, I'm going to look like I'm waving at everyone throughout just because I decided to go ahead and break my wrist for fun. So I am Hilary de Menna, and I am the campaign coordinator for Draw the Line, which is an interactive campaign by the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centers. But we are going to say OCRCC because that is less of a mouthful. So like I said before, I was actually initially brought on to the OCRCC as a social media consultant for a short contract. And then I was brought back on as the Draw the Line campaign coordinator just this past August. I do have a background in feminist writing, and I create social media content and work in online community management for various nonprofits. Just some background on the OCRCC. So established in 1977, the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centers is a network of sexual assault centers across Ontario, representing 33 member centers. So the OCRCC advocates for the needs of survivors of sexual violence across the province to government and other regional, provincial, and national groups, engaging in policy work and speaking to the media about sexual violence myths and misconceptions, the facts about reporting and conviction rates in Canada, and the needs of survivors in local communities. We partner with allies to share information about sexual violence and its root causes, participate in public education on sexual violence, and facilitate communication between sexual assault centers. So today's discussion, just to set the expectation, it is a short presentation, about 20 to 25 minutes. So I'm not going to sit here and create a social media calendar or go step by step on how to totally organize the campaign. But what I can do is introduce the Draw the Line campaign, as well as its public education resources, and speak to the online presence that we have, the successes and the challenges, and questions will be answered afterward. So more on the Draw the Line campaign. So Draw the Line is an interactive campaign created and managed by the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centers. There is a French side of things, and that's put on by Action Ontarienne. The campaign aims to engage Ontarians in dialogue about sexual violence. Draw the Line challenges common myths about sexual violence and equips bystanders with information on how to intervene safely and effectively. The project is done with the hope that more Ontarians will become educated on sexual violence. They'll be able to spot sexual violence, as well as feel empowered to make a difference. So the Draw the Line campaign actually works with partners. So most recently, I did a web series with partners Egal Canada, White Ribbon, Action Ontarienne, and OFIA. And these partnerships go over, sorry, I'm trying to think of all the things the partnerships do. We create manuals, consultations, social media campaigns, and web series. And we meet regularly just to make sure that we are having all voices heard throughout our campaign. So there you go, videos, webinars, consultations, manuals. And it's important to have all these voices represented. We also create Draw the Line scenarios, which is a big part of the Draw the Line campaign. So they present everyday situations and offer ways that we can intervene. So actually, call to actions were mentioned earlier. So Draw the Line's call to action is, where do you draw the line? You'll see that on a lot of the materials. So you'll see the materials on posters or postcards, usually within educational settings, sexual assault centers, and community organizations, and they are downloadable online. When you go to drawtheline.ca, you'll see these resources divided by partners, as well as themes. So some themes include alcohol-facilitated assault, male-focused, multilingual, social media, and youth-focused. So I'm going to go through just 3 examples of the Draw the Line scenarios because they are such a big part of the campaign. So one of them is, and it's OCRCC created, a friend sends you a naked picture of a girl he knows. Is it a big deal to share it with others? And what Draw the Line does through our workshops and through our media and social media campaigns is offer discussion prompts. So why is it important to draw the line? In this case, it says, when we look away from sexual violence, we make it easier for the perpetrator to continue the violence. Every choice we make and every action we take, no matter how small, has the power to make a difference. So we try to keep that empowering tone and showing how bystander intervention can be done in everyday ways. So when to draw the line, for example, in this situation, consent matters, and consent is something that must be asked for every step of the way. What's more, sharing or possessing a nude photo of someone under the age of 18 can be legally defined as possessing or distributing child pornography. And then again, how to draw the line. And we show steps on every scenario. So this would say, getting involved doesn't have to be, and ideally shouldn't be, a big deal. You always have options. And some are, it stops here, when you don't send it to anyone else. Press delete, don't look at the picture in the first place, and call your friend out by telling them it's definitely not cool. So I pulled social media specific ones just to remain on brand with the new media topic. But other examples from this campaign are Egal Canada created, someone posts on Facebook that Daniela is actually a dude. Do you share it? And same thing, and Egal will share statistics and support resources. And to keep the messaging consistent, why draw the line, when to draw the line, how to draw the line. And a final example, and there's so many that you can find on our website for today, is a community member has been texting your friend inappropriate messages. Do you tell someone? And same thing, keeping it consistent. Why, when, how, support resources. So we try to have this consistency throughout everything, no matter which partner created the scenario, just to remain on brand and on message with the campaign. So you can find all these resources at no cost, downloadable at drawtheline.ca, and they can also be ordered from Publications Ontario, again at no cost. So these resources are generally used by sexual assault centers, and they're developed by sexual assault centers. Centers are more grassroots and trauma-informed and do work that is often survivor-led. It's also important to note that few survivors use the criminal justice system, as it can be a traumatizing process, and police involvement isn't always a safe option for everyone. So it's possible to receive support outside of the legal system, and that can be through sexual assault centers. And this isn't always known, so social media is a way for these centers to connect with survivors. It also increases accessibility. I mean, I'm in Toronto right now, so maybe resources are easier for me. Rural communities, not so much. So the social media presence allows an accessibility that wasn't really seen before. So we have all these scenarios, the posters, the postcards. We're starting to create more videos, and videos has a challenge where you may want to have a face of the organization consistently throughout, which may not always be possible. Like I don't have the time to be the spokesperson within all the videos, and I can't tag anyone else within our very small nonprofit. So this is an example of a text-based video created through Powtoon, and it can show how you can do this without having a face to the organization. As well, it provides resources about bystander intervention. So this particular example is from a new 4-part series that we have, and I will play that. I'm also going to stop the video for a few moments because there's music and no one needs to see me bopping around to it because it's just habit. So there you go. An example also of forever keeping the campaign in mind. I just entered some bystander intervention in there real quick. So just as a draw the line recap before we get into more of the social media side of things, so Draw the Line campaign is responsible for resource creation and distribution, workshop facilitation, and then why we're here today, the social media campaigns. All right, so social media is an important channel to connect with survivors, and I'll show you some stats, some analytics to kind of support that. So this is a graph about our demographics with Instagram. So looking at our Facebook and Instagram stats specifically, our highest demographic is women. I do want to note that unfortunately Facebook and Instagram, which is the same, use a gender binary, which is unfortunate. Our largest media consumers, according to these stats, are women between the ages of 25 and 44. The younger side of this population is leading with Instagram, as Instagram tends to be younger, and Facebook is losing its popularity within younger generations. So what we see here is we do have men engaging with the content, but a challenge is encouraging more men to engage with the content. So what public educators have been doing within sexual assault centers, they have been developing male allyship programming, as we are recognizing there is more of a need. So as this programming continues to be developed, this will be reflected within campaign material in order to reach a wider audience. This was discussed at Draw the Line Day, which is an internal forum for public educators from the sexual assault centers across Ontario. And the two topics that were talked about this year, as voted by public educators, was male allyship as well as social media. Another challenge from those stats were we want to reach younger audiences. However, and we'll talk about this more, right now we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and that content can easily be repurposed to go across all channels just for consistent messaging. TikTok is a whole new platform, and it requires just original content and time that not everyone may have in a nonprofit, as well as we're going back to that face of the organization conundrum. Do I want to be the face of the organization? What if someone else takes over the coordination? Is Draw the Line always going to be connected to Hillary's face? So it's these things that we kind of need to think about. So am I saying TikTok will never be in Draw the Line's future? I would love for it to. Right now, just acknowledging the time and capacity, it's not. But that is a way that we could reach younger audiences. When we're looking at analytics, it can be discouraging within this field because it is sensitive material and people may want to be viewing it anonymously. So they may not be sharing posts or liking the pages and the content as much as other content, like a fan page for a musician, for example. So we do have to keep that in mind when it comes to engagement. As well, if someone's following the Draw the Line campaign, they may be following the OCRCC or their local sexual assault centers' social media platforms as well. So it can be overwhelming having the same information constantly. So although analytics are a great tool, of course, use them, look at them, see what works. Don't be discouraged, especially within nonprofits. We're doing so much. Just keep reminding yourself you're doing what you can and just remember your capacity. Because social media is a big job. I have my notes beside me and I've been adding to them consistently since the last 2 weeks from developing this presentation because there is so much to keep in mind. I'm going to go through it. I'm just going to be candid. I'm looking at them right now. So social media takes time and it can easily become a full-time job and it often isn't given full-time job status, just to be frank there. You need to know about algorithms, best times to post, how often to post, mindful and intentional processes with accessibility. So are we doing the image captions, the image descriptions? You need to know which hashtags are shadow banned, which hashtags are effective. You need to find and maintain a brand voice in accordance with an organization's mission, vision, and values. And this includes not just like post content and captions, but usernames, taglines, content pillars, branding, and an overall consistent messaging. And you need to have the online community management know-how, such as navigating response times. So are you able to answer right away? Do you want to have a message saying our messages aren't checked 24/7? Perhaps email us if that's a better way. And how do you respond to the more unpleasant side of the internet, the trolls? Is this done publicly? Are we taking it private? Do we have the capacity to take this on privately? When is it in good faith? These are all questions that are constantly being brought to mind. And it can be difficult to navigate, and it's a lot of trial and error, which is absolutely fair. So again, social media is very hard work. I keep reiterating this because I want there to become a world where nonprofits make it a full-time job. But unfortunately, because nonprofits often have a small staff, the job of social media is often tacked on to a pre-existing role, which can get overwhelming. But that's okay, because we're going to learn about how to set our own expectations and keep up and practice self-care. So I have mentioned capacity. Social media is constantly changing. So not just platforms, but just the best practices, keeping up with algorithms. If you don't have the budget for boosted posts, how can we make sure those posts are being seen? And then taking care of yourself as well, because, well, with posting constant messaging about gender-based violence, it can become overwhelming, and self-care is an important practice as well. So when it comes to capacity, I just want to remind you to do what you can and do it well. So instead of spreading yourself thin to make sure you're on every single platform, find the platforms that seem to be reaching your target audiences and really lean into those. So an example for the Draw the Line campaign in OCRCC would be, TikTok was a big example. Even Twitter's online community management is a little bit different than with Facebook and Instagram because it is in so much real time. And so what we're doing right now, because of the time limits, is posting consistently to Twitter, but we may not be doing the quoted retweets and the retweets that ideally we could be doing. And that's okay. We're realizing our time at this moment. Social media changes quickly, which I kind of mentioned. So just to always remember that, try to keep an eye out for different trends. And if something's not working, it's always worth looking into algorithms, so like changes. It might not be you, don't you worry. And self-care. So again, this is hard work. This can be intense content to be consumed on a consistent basis. And if you're in this field, you're bringing in a strong element of care and emotion to your work already. So it's important to set boundaries and resist the urge to just log on real quick when it's off work hours. And this is good just for your own mental health and your work-life balance, but also acknowledging the work behind social media and really being like, no, this is real, genuine labor, and it should be treated as such. Because you want to keep that balance, especially with so many of us working from home. It's very easy to log on and work longer than you intended or than your check-in times. So with the coalition and through the Draw the Line campaign, we have internal support to deliver our social media messaging. So the OCRCC brought on a social media consultant, and that was me. That shows how small nonprofit worlds are, by the way. And part of this work was creating a visioning document, which is actually quite similar to what the first part of this presentation was about. So the visioning document looked at tools, strategies, best practices, the style guide, how to keep accessible, and really talked about how to create a social media campaign. And this has been kept internal for the coalition as well as its member centers. And what I did as the consultant was I presented this information to the membership board to highlight the importance of social media and to show how it has become a communication staple. I've also presented a section of the visioning document to public educators at our internal forum, the Draw the Line Day. And after listening to the concerns of public educators when it comes to social media, I just created some time-saving tips and divided that into kind of 3 sections just to save time and keep on track without it becoming overwhelming. Because again, social media can easily become a full-time job. So I just set a lot of challenges to social media. I made it sound, it is difficult, but it's worth it. And there are successes. So we receive a lot of testimonials around the helpfulness of the Draw the Line campaign through our online campaigns. We receive disclosures, which aren't shared in this slide, of course. But it is good to know that we are reaching survivors and we are offering like support that they can reach. And we've connected survivors with counseling and sexual assault centers. And again, this is something that couldn't have been done before. So as challenging as this COVID era has been, it has shown how social media can work within this field and really offering support and services. So after all that talk about capacity, I'm going to take on more. I'm excited. It's the new fiscal year, signed a new contract. Draw the Line is turning 10 in May. So there will be an accompanying social media campaign. Pretty excited about that. I'm mentioning our website refresh just to show how quickly social media changes. So the website is only 10 years old, which sounds young, but in social media world, that's ancient. And we need to do a refresh of that. It was built without thinking about the constant changes of an online presence. And of course, no one could have predicted COVID. And so now that online has become so much bigger, we need a website refresh, and I'm quite excited about that. We also have a newsletter, which sounds like a basic. Newsletters went out of style for a bit, but they're coming back with a vengeance. So we did a soft launch within the last few months, and that's going to be carried on throughout the next year. Also an Instagram live series. I did an Instagram live with Ophia, one of our partners, and it really showed how worthwhile they are. It's sort of a workaround the video thing where you need like a face to the campaign. Instagram live series, it has a bit more flexibility. So I'll be talking to sexual assault center public educators, for example. And then not on here, but this is my not so subtle plea. We're gonna make our YouTube channel more robust and we're gonna start adding videos. YouTube is slightly cruel because you need 100 subscribers before you get a nifty URL. Until then, it's just a series of strange and confusing numbers and letters. So after this, everyone's gonna go to the Draw the Line social media channels because they're gonna be so excited after this presentation. And you'll see there's links everywhere saying subscribe to our YouTube. And it will be much appreciated. And here are those social media channels. So Facebook, we're Draw the Line. Instagram and Twitter is Draw the Line On. And maybe next time I'll have TikTok, who knows? And if you want to reach me for anything, you can reach me at hillary@sexualassaultsupport.ca. If you email info@drawtheline.ca, you will also reach me. I'll put this in the chat as well if anyone wants to connect about social media, the work that the OCRCC does, or the work that Draw the Line campaign does. And we also have an online survey. I do ask that you take a moment to fill this out. It helps us keep the conversation going as it helps provide feedback in creating workshops. As well, it helps us show our funders why this work is important. You're going to log on and it will ask questions about bystander intervention because it's our general survey that we send to everything. But I snuck that video in, if you recall, so I feel like it counts. I'll put this in the chat as well. I kept this, try to keep it short because I want to leave room for questions because it really depends on everyone's comfort with social media to see what to speak about, I would say, or what points to touch on.
All right, thank you so much for that, Hillary. I think it's so helpful to kind of hear from someone who does this work and what some of the challenges are, because you're right. I think sometimes, we see all these social media posts and it seems easy peasy, but really it isn't, and it's a lot of work. So I really appreciate you talking about your experience and the challenges, but also some of the successes that these campaigns have along the way. Hillary, thank you so much for presenting and taking part in this event. We really appreciate your expertise on this, and I look forward to connecting on some social media questions in the future as well.
Absolutely.
And to everyone who joined us today, thank you so much. Thank you for your questions, and you can expect a follow-up email from us shortly. Have a really great rest of the day, everyone, and thank you so much.